Okay, next up we have Lia Rensin, Critical Race Theory. It's the basis for the Ethnic Studies model curriculum in California. Our next speaker, Lia, is a mother of three, two of whom are in the Los Altos Public High School. She became involved in the controversy surrounding California's Ethnic Studies model curriculum about a year and a half ago, but started taking action locally in October when a proposal was brought to her kids' school district to include a course requirement based on the original draft of this problematic statewide curriculum. She now volunteers for the Alliance for Constructive Ethnic Studies, acronym is ACES, a grassroots organization working to remove political agendas from ethnic studies. ACES is working with lawmakers and community members, building coalitions among various groups, affecting change in the state curriculum. And I'm so glad that people are watching this because they also fight against critical race theory indoctrination in our schools on the county and at the district level. Please welcome Lia Rensin.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me and for giving me this opportunity to talk about what I think is an incredibly important issue, both in our state and in our nation. I'm going to share my screen. I'm usually fairly decent with this. I hopefully get this presentation going. There we go. So today I want to talk about critical ethnic studies and critical race theory. Critical race theory is something that many of you have probably already heard about. Critical ethnic studies, not so much. Critical ethnic studies is the teaching of critical race theory in our schools. So just so you understand the difference. As a bit of a background on ethnic studies is an academic discipline that was created in the 1960s at San Francisco State University, and it was advocated for by the Third World Liberation Front in the 60s, again, at San Francisco State University. Then it moved to Berkeley, and then it became basically a primary tool in higher education. And I think we see that now. California state universities have it as a requirement. It is a highly political academic discipline that we see a lot of indoctrination in higher education. There are multiple ways of teaching ethnic studies. The two primary ones, the main primary one is critical ethnic studies. There is also another version called constructive ethnic studies. And here I have kind of a visual of the differences really between the two. If you look at one of the book jackets from a critical ethnic studies book, you see climbing up a pyramid, kind of stepping on top of each other with their fists raised in the air. That's critical ethnic studies, as opposed to a constructive ethnic studies approach, where you have a visual depiction of ethnic shapes and colors next to each other, offering basically visually different perspectives. And I think that's a pretty good visual differentiation between the two. In a nutshell, I would say critical ethnic studies emphasizes the CRT victim oppressor paradigm. It has a very specific political ideology, and it calls for the challenging of imperialistic and colonial homogenistic beliefs and practices. So they like to throw a lot of really big words out there that most people don't understand. And one of the main differences between critical ethnic studies and critical race theory, which is why critical ethnic studies is actually more dangerous than critical race theory, is that it promotes militant resistance as a mean to social change. So everything is viewed through a critical race theory lens, but critical ethnic studies actively promotes militant resistance. They use militant and violent role models in the curriculum in order to indoctrinate our kids into moving and resisting the oppression that is inherent in the United States. Constructive ethnic studies, on the other hand, emphasizes building bridges of understanding and collaboration. It really focuses on ethnic group contributions to the United States, and it promotes critical thinking and multiple perspectives. So the Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum is a statewide model curriculum. In 2016, an assembly bill was passed that mandated the development of this model curriculum. And its objective is to prepare prepare pupils to be global citizens and have an appreciation for the contributions of multiple cultures. This again becomes a model curriculum, and the districts and schools are not required to follow it. The intent was that hopefully that they would. So the first draft was released in May of 2019, and many ethnic groups were horrified by the direction that the curriculum had taken. There was exclusion of many ethnic groups in the state of California. There was blatant anti-Semitism and anti-capitalism. Pro-Marxist and Maoist violent leaders were highlighted. And basically, because there was so much backlash, they were required to go back and redo it and come out with a second draft, which was released in August 2020. Unfortunately, the second draft was basically written by the same people who wrote the first draft. So not a whole lot changed. There was, it basically looked the same. They removed some of the more blatant wording, but the foundation of critical ethnic studies and critical race theory specifically were called out in this draft, and it was made very clear that that was the intent of this model curriculum. In November, so that of course, that didn't go over so well either. And just in November of 2020, they had a third draft released. And some of the more offensive language and anti-capitalistic trope was removed, but the guiding values, which are based in critical ethnic studies and critical race theory, remain. And all of the subsequent lessons have to tie into these guiding values. So again, nothing's really changed. They did have an appendix that had a lot of ethnic group contributions with these sample lessons. But again, they're all tied back to guiding values, which is all tied back to critical ethnic studies. So we're still fighting the same problem. After the first draft kind of got panned, an organization called Save Ethnic Studies was created, and it was created by the authors of the first draft. And they are still advocating very strongly. They have petitions online. They are fighting at every step that they can for the ESMC to go back to the first draft of the curriculum model. So unfortunately, critical ethnic studies is not just confined to this ethnic studies model curriculum. We are actively seeing it in our schools right now. I think many of you probably are aware of the Cupertino Elementary School third grade math class that was, they had to halt their math lessons in order for the teacher to teach a lesson on social identities, privilege, and dominant cultures. And obviously Cupertino is a highly immigrant, not English as a primary language community. So the parents were understandably a little upset about this, that a bunch of 8-year-olds would not be teaching math, not be learning math, but doing this instead. At ACES, we've had lots of people come to us and tell us that their individual school districts are looking at doing a required ethnic studies course. So the thing is that even though the state has mandated a model curriculum, there is no, as of now, requirement for an ethnic studies class for graduation, although that is coming down the pike. But it doesn't matter, because the people who are behind the Save Ethnic Studies thing are now going to individual school districts, and they are trying to get it in through that back door. We're specifically seeing it in Fremont Union High School District, the MBLA High School District, and Sequoia Union High School Districts. I am sure they're not alone. I know people in East Bay who are having this issue, and I know people in North Bay who are also having this issue. I've also recently become aware of a Santa Clara County Office of Education Ethics Studies initiative, which they say is supposed to be to aid in the creation of a scalable and workable ethnic studies curriculum for the county. But what it really is a training and indoctrination of teachers in figuring out how to get this into all classes and all grades, K through 12. I've also found out that my high school district, the MBLA High School District, has a required teacher equity training, led by the Pacific Education Group. And I've got some slides for you on both of the last two things to just show you how insidious this is. So the Santa Clara County Office of Education has created this ethnic studies initiative. The three leaders of it, one of them is an elementary school teacher who was one of the authors of the original ethnic studies model curriculum. The slide that you see up there is taken directly from him and his class. Another person who's a leader is a San Jose State professor who has written numerous articles on critical ethnic studies and critical race theory. And the third person is a state employee who works for the Office of Education, who is also a proponent of this. So I've been to one of these task force meetings. I know two other people who have also. And it's a whole long hour-and-a-half training session of teachers in this idea of critical ethnic studies, and how do you incorporate it into your class. And again, I say K through 12, all disciplines. There was an art teacher in one of these sessions who said, well, I really want to have my kids focus, my elementary school kids focus on this, but my principal says, no, my kids should really be having an outlet and be able to draw and express themselves. How do I get around that? And so they actively are talking with teachers on how to get around their administration and district and county guidelines and incorporate this. Fundamentally, what this means, what they are trying to tell our children, is that there are systems of oppression, white supremacy, genocide, patriarchy, classism, religion, and land ownership. And those six categories are all equal and all contribute to oppression. So they, in a sense, they're saying religion is the same as genocide, that land ownership is the same as genocide. And so what they say also is that these systems of oppression will always be in existence as long as we live in a land that is controlled by the dominant culture, which of course are whites. In Mountain View, with this equity training, they've got this group called the Pacific Educational Group, and this shows you their framework, right? And I have a circle around knowledge, and they clearly state that their framework is based on critical race theory. The two quotes I have up here are from the creator of this group, and clearly calling out white and white people for racism and oppression. The next are some of their slides that I got. So the first day is, talking about white privilege. You have to do a white privilege activity, and then there's a lot of critical race theory foundations that are done on that. Overnight, you need to discuss your white privilege or think about your white privilege exercise, then read Singleton's article, White is a Color, and then also read another article about white entitlement. Day 2 is all about examining whiteness and white racism. And so these two things right here are two different slides from day 2, but the entire focus is on white racism and white oppression. Obviously, the problem with that is not all teachers are white. This is a required course for teachers. Then what are the non-white teachers doing during this time? What does this say to teachers? Should they be looking at their co-teacher and who is white and say that you are racist and biased and are oppressing me? And it's the same argument we have with kids in the classroom, right? So this is stuff that's going on everywhere. There's a lot that you can do. There's a lot going on. So, on the state level, we still have the ethnic studies model curriculum. It is going to the State Board of Education. There is a meeting in March, I want to say the 17th, but I'm not 100% positive on that, where they will be discussing it and likely voting on it, because they have a requirement by the end of March to pass this. And it's not like pass or don't pass. It's like they have to pass something by the end of March. which we think is unreasonable given the problems with the ESMC. I have AB, I have 1010, it should be 101. I apologize for that. There's a new bill in the Assembly that is requiring, that is calling for the mandating an ethnic studies class for graduation. So we had that before, the governor vetoed it. It is now back in the form of AB 101. And we also have a lot of education codes where we think that there could be added to prevent having critical ethnic studies in. So, you know, having people call the governor, who does have some say and sway here, all local and state elected officials, again, to deal with what's going on in the county and in their districts, it would be really helpful. The other thing that's really helpful for us is trying to find other examples of where this is going on in our local school districts. It's happening in the middle school, elementary districts, and it's also happening in the high school districts. And so any specifics that we can get allows us to go to county boards and district boards. It also gives us an in with the media. And we have a couple of media contacts who are highly attuned to this, but they've said very specifically that they can't do much until they can see it playing out in the classroom. So eyes and ears on the ground are super helpful. And the last thing is that I will put a plug in for the Santa Clara County Board of Education and the MBLA school district, because we have been meeting with board members from both. We are planning on doing a large scale presentation on February 3rd at the Santa Clara County Board of Education meeting. We need people to sign letters. We need people to come and speak. And the same will be said for the MBLA school district. But this is, you know, a model we can do, we can repeat. If anyone has any questions at all, I'm available anytime. My email address is on the bottom. I can put it in the chat later. I think that's pretty much it. I appreciate the time again, and just for letting me come and talk and raise this really important issue.
It is a very important issue. Thank you, Leah. And there are a lot of questions out there about how to.
Can I just ask Leah one question?
Sure.
Leah, can we make your slides available to our audience?
Sure. Yep.
Can you email them to us, either to me or to Wendy, and we'll let people, because they're asking for them. So
Yep,
thank you so much. Appreciate it.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.